The waiter walked over to her table, holding the ring with the same delicacy as an executioner holds his sword. As I watched them from a distance with a calm that even I found unlikely, the restaurant was filled with laughter and clinking wine glasses. But for me, it was as if time had stopped the moment I saw that frozen expression on her face. She looked at me out of the corner of her eye, then fixed her gaze on the ring he was handing her. Her eyes widened, and in that moment I knew she understood. This wedding ring wasn't just a ring, it was a silent announcement that I knew everything. It was a warning that our marriage was over. For months I was the audience at a play, where I was the only one who didn't know the script. Endless outings, cell phone messages that never seemed to be just work, stuffed discreet laughs in the middle of the night. As if every laugh was a silent confession, I noticed every detail. But I kept going anyway, pretending not to notice, waiting for her to say something, for her to confess, for her to offer some explanation, that however false would save me the trouble of putting the pieces together. But she never did. And little by little I found myself trapped in a game I no longer wanted to play, but couldn't let go of. I wanted to let her know what it was like to be betrayed in front of everyone, in front of the one she believed was true happiness. It wasn't just wounded pride or ruined love. It was trust tossed to the wind like old paper. I still remember the first time we met, the way she laughed at my lame jokes and held my hand as if we were inseparable. There were memories that used to warn me, but now they burned like embers, setting everything on fire. And in the back of my mind I remembered the prenuptial agreement, that piece of paper lovingly signed years ago that now appeared as an unexpected solution. She would lose everything he had lied, cheated, and pretended to get. And I knew this was the outcome she never imagined when she started this dirty game.
This is our Life channel. If you haven't subscribed yet, please join us to stay updated with more real stories happening around you.
The waiter finally reached the table. I saw her lover relaxed, laughing at something he had just said, completely unaware of what was about to happen. She looked up, and at that moment she realized that I was there, watching every second, every reaction with a look she had never seen before. The smile faded from her face like a flame being extinguished, replaced by an expression of absolute horror. She knew that the effect of this alliance was not just the pain of separation, but a reflection of what was to come, the brutal reality that awaited her, the consequences she feared so much, and that was all she could whisper. Her voice wavered as her eyes filled with tears, a mixture of shock and pleading. The lover, confused, looked from one to the other, trying to understand, but unable to put together the pieces that only I'd completed. I wanted to laugh at the irony, but instead I stood firm, unshaken. It was a silence that said more than any words. I wasn't there to argue, to explain. There was no more dialogue. The alliance was my last word, the final point of a story that she herself had chosen to end. As I left the restaurant, I let everyone's eyes follow me, feeling the weight of judgment. But I didn't care. All I wanted was the reassurance that she knew what she had lost. She had sacrificed our past, our history, for a fragile and empty illusion, and now all she had left was her own guilt. The next step she could not even imagine was already underneath, one last piece that would take away what she had left. The material comfort she believed was rightfully hers. Little did she know that every penny, every asset was protected. I wouldn't let her leave with anything, just as she left me, with nothing when she chose to betray me. As I walked away, I imagined the shock that would follow the discovery of the cause that night. What she didn't know yet, but would soon, is that the betrayal would not only destroy what we had, but take away everything she had taken for granted. Welcome to the canal. There is no room here for justifying betrayal. Every story told is fictional, but it carries a truth. Betrayal is a poison that destroys, it leaves ruins relationships and leaves deep scars. Get ready for an intense story where every action has consequences. Adjust your headset and dive into a web of secrets and shocking revelations. Good story. Adam Turner always thought he had found the love of his life in Laura. They met at a party their senior year of college, and it was as if fate had paused to let them meet. Laura had an easy smile and the beauties that enchanted him. A talented painter, she was intense and brought passion to every detail, from the way she mixed colors to the way she pronounced each word. Adam, on the other hand, was a practical and focused businessman with a calm and introspective personality, qualities that made their relationship even more balanced over the years. For a long time, Adam and Laura's marriage was the union of two people who seemed destined for each other. Spontaneous trips and conversations that lasted into the wee hours of the morning brought them closer and closer together. Adam felt that in Laura he had found the perfect woman to share his life with. He had built a solid career and was proud of every accomplishment. But it was with Laura that he shared his most secret dreams. Together they bought a house which they carefully renovated. Every detail, from the color of the walls to the garden of carefully chosen flowers, was a reflection of the two of them. But time brought changes. Laura, always restless, began to expand her social circle, driven by a desire to grow as an artist, and influenced by a need to feel more active and recognized. It was natural for Adam to feel a certain discomfort with the increase in nights out, and the attention she now paid to cultural events and art galleries. He tried to ignore the discomfort, chalking it up to a period of self-discovery that everyone has the right to experience. As the years passed, Adam immersed himself in work, a way of convincing himself that it was necessary to ensure their stability. He believed strongly in the balance they had established. Whenever possible, he went out of his way to make their moments special with dinners, short trips, and unexpected gifts. Laura, in turn, was grateful, but often seemed distant, her mind far away as if she were absent. Adam noticed these moments of separation, but chose to believe it was just fatigue and need for space. Adam had unwavering trust in Laura, but like any human being, he was susceptible to the contrarieties that arise in everyday life. In rare moments, when Laura was particularly reserved, he would feel a twinge of uncertainty, but he would quickly shake it off. He remembered how their relationship had been built on trust and love, and that was enough to suppress any doubts. The house they had built, full of memories and dreams, was now the stage for a different atmosphere, almost imperceptible but undeniable. Deep conversations gave way to short, quick dialogues, and the silences between them grew. At one point, Adam began to wonder when things had changed, but he could never pinpoint a specific moment. The change, like the wear, had been gradual, a small detour on a road that had once seemed so straight. One night, Laura came home later than usual from a gallery where she was exhibiting her paintings. Adam was waiting for her in the living room, with a glass of wine in his hand, visibly tired but maintaining a welcoming appearance. Laura walked through the door, dropping her bag on the floor and sighing as if she was carrying the weight of the world. Adam tried to break the ice by starting a conversation about the exhibit, asking how the night had been and who she had met. Laura answered with short, scattered sentences, but Adam insisted. "Was everything okay?" he asked, trying unsuccessfully to make a connection. Laura hesitated before answering, something he had rarely noticed before. "Yes, it was a good night," she said, without looking directly at him. Adam sensed that something was wrong, but he didn't press further. He knew Laura well enough to know that pressuring her would only make her shut down even more. At the same time, he couldn't escape the growing unease. In that silence, he perceived an invisible barrier separating them, a barrier he didn't know how to cross. Despite his doubts, Adam tried to maintain harmony and remembered the moments of complicity. Every memory they shared was an attempt to rebuild what he felt was fraying between them. He still loved her, but he feared that this love would be like sand slipping through his fingers, falling apart without him being able to do anything to stop it. Laura, on the other hand, was increasingly caught up in her own world, her desire to expand her artistic horizons, and the new people she met in art circles, fascinated by the possibilities that freedom promised. Laura still loved Adam, but she felt that something had changed in her head. The security he provided was no longer enough. She longed for something she couldn't even name. Over the months, small gestures and glances revealed this silent distance. Adam watched her with the patience of someone who hoped she would find herself again, that the separation would be a passing phase. He expected her to return to the woman he had known, and with whom he had shared the best moments of his life. When their eyes met, he still saw the woman he loved. But this image was increasingly accompanied by a weight of uncertainty. The tension between them was subtle, but it was there like a shadow that was beginning to envelop their relationship. When he was alone, Adam often found himself thinking about the choices they had made, the paths they had chosen, and wondering if anything could have been different. He felt a kind of nostalgia for the future they had planned together, as if that future was slipping away without him being able to grasp it. But he remained hopeful. believing that with time and patience they could overcome any difficulty. He knew Laura well enough to know that she was complex, and that sometimes she had to lose herself to find herself. What he didn't know, and was afraid to find out, was whether she would find her way back to him this time. Adam tried to convince himself that his relationship with Laura was just going through a difficult phase, a phase from which they would both emerge stronger. He knew that she was a woman full of life and desires, and that her involvement in the artistic world had always been an essential part of her personality. But little by little he began to sense that something was different. Her departures became more frequent, her answers became more vague, and even the casual encounters between them seemed rehearsed as if she were there in body, but absent in spirit every time. I tried to connect, I received evasive or distracted responses. He began to feel that instead of being at her side, he was always a few feet away trying to reach her. One night, Laura arrived even later than usual, smelling perfume that wasn't hers. She entered the house with a tired look, but without the usual exhaustion, without the glow of someone who had worked a long day. Adam watched her silently as she took off her shoes and walked up the stairs without saying a word. He stayed in the living room, listening to her footsteps, lost on the second floor, while the silence in the house seemed deeper and more disturbing. That night was the breaking point for Adam. He could no longer ignore the uneasiness, could no longer pretend that there wasn't a growing void between them. The next day, Adam decided to follow his intuition, and for the first time in years of marriage, he picked up her cell phone. He hesitated, feeling like he was invading the privacy of someone he loved, but he was driven by a greater force. He knew that if he stayed in the dark, the emptiness would consume him. When he unlocked the phone, he found a steady stream of messages and calls from an unknown number. His previously rational mind began to spin toward a scenario he had never imagined possible. Adam resisted the urge to confront her immediately. Instead, he began to watch her every move, the appointments, the excuses, the art events, and the sporadic outings. He noted every detail, trying to understand what was going on, looking for something concrete to justify his suspicions. Deep down, he still wished he was wrong. Still wanted to believe that the problem was in his own imagination, that perhaps it was just tiredness distorting his perception of reality. A few days later, when Laura said she was at another event, Adam decided to check it out. He went to the gallery where she was supposed to be, but when he arrived, he found the place closed with no sign of activity. It was like a cold blow, a silent confirmation that something was deeply wrong. He felt his heart racing and his body filled with a sense of disbelief and despair. That was the moment he realized there might be no turning back. Adam returned home that night determined to find out the truth. Every silence and absent look from Laura began to fit into a dark puzzle, and he decided that if he was being betrayed, he would not allow it to remain hidden. On a sunny Saturday morning, as Laura prepared for another show, Adam watched her silently, as if saying goodbye to something he had always cherished. Her voice, happy and distant, was the final confirmation that something very important had changed between them. After she left, he took the car and followed her, keeping a safe distance. The tension in his chest was almost unbearable, and he felt his stomach sink with every mile they covered. After almost half an hour, he saw her pull up in front of an isolated restaurant far from downtown. She got out of the car, fixing her hair and smiling in a way Adam hadn't seen before for a while. And then he saw him, the man waiting for her outside with a carefree smile, without any guilt or fear. They greeted each other with a brief but intimate kiss, enough to let Adam know that here was the confirmation he feared. He stayed in the car, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly, watching them enter the restaurant as if they were a normal couple without a shadow of remorse. He felt a mixture of pain and disbelief. The feeling that the ground had been pulled out from under his feet. He wondered how someone he had shared a life with could just erase everything and pretend he never existed. It was as if the love they had built together had been dissolved without explanation, without him even having a chance to fight for it. As he watched the restaurant move, a cold anger began to wash over him. Replacing the initial shock, he had dedicated himself, worked hard, and put all his hopes and trust into this relationship. The betrayal was not just a breach of commitment, but a blow to everything he believed in, everything he had worked for to keep. He felt every breath heavy, his chest tight, but he knew he had to control his emotions. He couldn't act hot-headed. He didn't want to confront them impulsively. Instead, Adam got out of the car with steady steps and walked to the entrance of the restaurant. He went in and hid at a table far away from where he could watch Laura and her lover laughing and toasting as if they were two people in love and free of any responsibility. Her image, so familiar and yet so strange, cut through him like a razor blade. The woman he loved, the woman with whom he had made plans and built a life, was now a stranger before him. Someone he could barely relate to. As the waiter passed, Adam called to him and asked him to give him a ring. The one he had worn in private since the day they had exchanged vows. The ring was not only a symbol of their commitment, but also a bitter reminder that he had been faithful. While she had betrayed him, the waiter hesitated at the unusual request, but agreed, took the ring with a curious look, and then walked over to Laura's table. Adam watched with tense serenity, every second feeling like a pivotal moment. He watched as the waiter handed over the ring. Saw Laura's confused look turn to silent shock. The lovers looked from one to the other, not understanding what was happening, but Laura knew immediately. She knew that he knew that everything they had built was hanging by a thread. Adam waited in a corner chair. His impassive expression hid the inner storm that was consuming him. Laura and her lover, still stunned by the ring given to them, looked around trying to understand if this was a bad joke. Laura's eyes finally fell on him. She lost her breath as if struck by an invisible blow, her face changing color as she tried to regain control in front of the man with whom she had shared years. With whom she had shared years of her life. She stood up shakily and approached with cautious steps, leaving her lover behind. Who watched her in confusion. Adam remained silent, his gaze fixed on her without a trace of emotion. When she stopped in front of him, the silence between them was almost palpable. Finally, she broke the silence, her voice wavering. "Why are you here? And this alliance, what does it mean?" Adam looked at her with a disturbing calm, his dark eyes fixed on her as if they saw beyond her appearance. "You know exactly what it means, Laura," she tried to answer, but the words seemed to catch in her throat. He continued, his voice low but firm. 15 years, Laura. 15 years of giving you my trust, my love, my life, and you throw it all away. Why? What else was I supposed to do?" Laura swallowed hard and looked away, but he didn't let her look at me, he ordered. She looked up, her lips parted in a silent plea for understanding. "Adam, I don't know what to say." "It's too late for excuses." He interrupted each word with a pain he could barely hide. "You already said everything I needed to hear with your actions." With each passing second, she seemed to shrink away from him, as if Adam's words were dismantling the image she had built for herself. She tried to touch his hand, but it drew back coldly. "You don't want to listen to me," she whispered. Her voice breaking, he gave a slightly bitter smile. "Listen to what?" "Laura, that this was a mistake. What do you regret? There are no excuses that can erase what you have done." He paused, his gaze penetrating. "But I want you to understand what is happening now." She looked at him confused. "What do you mean?" Adam took a deep breath, his voice more controlled than he expected. "I thought I knew love, Laura. I thought marriage was an unbreakable bond, but what you have done has changed everything. Unfortunately, before I got married, I had the good sense to protect everything I had built." She frowned, not understanding. "Adam, what are you saying?" He crossed his arms with an expression that was both calm and devastating. "Do you remember our prenuptial agreement?" Her face turned pale. "What? That was years ago. Why did you do that? I remember, Laura, and you better remember, too." Adam watched her reactions with a steady gaze without looking away. "There's a very specific clause in our contract, one you may have forgotten over the years, but which will be the only thing you need to worry about now." She began to tremble, and he could see the terror growing in her eyes, as if she finally understood the magnitude of what was about to happen. "Adam, please. What are you trying to say? You can't be serious." "I am more serious than ever, Laura," he replied, his voice deep and icy. "The contract says that, in the event of infidelity on your part, you lose all rights to what we have together. All the possessions, the money, the house, everything, you get nothing." She took a step back in shock. "This can't be true, Adam." "You've got to be kidding me." That was a long time ago. We never took it seriously. I took it, Laura. And now you're going to have to deal with the consequences. Adam crossed his arms, unwavering. You were the one who chose to throw away our marriage, and by that choice you will lose more than just my respect. You will lose everything. Laura shook her head, her eyes filled with tears. She began to speak, stumbling over her words. A desperate attempt to explain the inexplicable. Adam, please. I was confused, that's all. It doesn't mean anything, you know. I love you, always have. It was just a slip that will cost you dearly. He interrupted her. You thought you could get away with it, but it ends here. Adam felt the weight of his own words, but remained steadfast. Now, Laura, I want you to leave the house tomorrow yourself. This is your last night. Her eyes widened, a mixture of desperation and pleading in her expression. You can't do this to me, Adam. I have nowhere to go. Please, I made a mistake. But this can't end like this. He looked at her for a moment, and for the first time a spark of pain flashed in his eyes. But at the same time, he knew there was no turning back. She had broken something inside him that could not be repaired. Laura, I loved you like I never thought I could love anyone. And now I have to live with the fact that I was betrayed, that everything we built together was an illusion. He paused, his gaze steady but dark. You chose this path. Now you must walk it alone. She swallowed hard, tears streaming down her face, but she knew he wouldn't change his mind. Adam stood up without another word and left the restaurant. She stood looking at the ring on her hand, the symbol of a commitment that was now nothing more than a bitter reminder of what she had lost. Laura remained in the restaurant, feeling paralyzed as she processed the implications of what had just happened. The atmosphere around him seemed distorted, the voices of other customers muffled. The lights, once welcoming, were now blinding. The lover still watched the scene in disbelief, not fully comprehending the depth of what was happening. Laura, however, had no doubts. Adam's every word had been like a sentence, and she knew that whatever he said was final. The ring in her hand now weighed unbearably, a weight that symbolized broken promises and a crumbling future. Trying to catch her breath, Laura looked around, desperate for some kind of support, a word of comfort that she knew wouldn't come from anyone. There, the lover, already uncomfortable with the intensity of the situation, began to mumble a few words of apology. He shook his head from side to side. He tried to take Laura's hand, but she abruptly pulled it away, as if she only now realized what this approach meant and how fragile the support she was seeking from him was. Still in shock, Laura got up and walked out of the restaurant. Each step felt heavier, as if Adam's words continued to echo in her mind, crushing any remaining hope she might have had. The night was cold outside, but it was the feeling of emptiness growing inside that made her shiver. Laura knew that her home, the place she had built with Adam, and that held years of memories, was now beyond her reach. The world that until recently had seemed full of possibilities now seemed shrunken, a closed space where everything reminded her of her mistake. She began to walk through the city. Her thoughts clouded as she tried to digest the consequences of what she had done. With each street she walked, memories of her past, with Adam, surfaced painfully, like a rewinding tape, showing moments when they were happy, when nothing seemed capable of shattering what they had. She remembered every promise, every conversation about the future, how he was the foundation of everything she had built in her life. The security, the support, the unconditional love, all of it now out of reach. After hours of wandering, Laura finally found the strength to return to the house that in a few hours would no longer be her home. He entered slowly, afraid to find Adam. But the house was silent. Every corner was a painful reminder that the moment she walked through the door for the last time, everything familiar and comforting would be left behind. It was as if the walls, the photographs in their frames, every piece of furniture were silently saying goodbye. As she climbed the stairs to her room, she noticed that some of Adam's belongings were missing, as if he had already begun to disentangle himself. To erase the traces of their life together, he sat on the edge of the bed and stared into space. I knew there were no more. No excuses to make. No justifications. She tried to think of what she could have said or done differently, but regret was now a shadow that immediately enveloped her. The house seemed colder and more desolate, and silence was now its only companion. Laura realized that in addition to losing the material support and stability that Adam represented, she was losing something even more precious. The part of herself that believed she was whole, reliable, and loved with him. The inner emptiness was overwhelming, and she knew it would take a long time for the pain to subside if it ever did. At daybreak, Laura began packing her belongings. Each item she placed in the boxes seemed to carry an emotional weight, a memory that now became a farewell. The objects that had once been mundane details, a sculpture bought on a trip, a book he had given her, a painting she had painted, inspired by him, were now symbols of a love she had destroyed. The process of packing everything seemed eternal, and each item she placed in the boxes made her relive the moments they had shared as if she were slowly burning each memory. Adam returned in the morning, cool and determined. He watched her without saying a word as she tried to explain her feelings for the last time with trembling hands. Adam, I know that nothing you can say will change what I have done. I destroyed what we had, I know that, but I want you to know that it was never about you. It was about losing myself. Adam looked at her with a piercing stare without a trace of Laura. You destroyed me. You made me question every moment we spent together, every promise we made. There are no excuses that can fix this. You made your choices, and now you are going to live with them. She lowered her head, unable to look at him. The silence that followed was almost unbearable, and Laura felt the weight of the physical and emotional separation growing by the second. With everything packed, she finally left the house. Every step felt like a painful goodbye, and the feeling of emptiness was overwhelming. Adam stayed in the hallway and watched her go, knowing that no matter how much this situation destroyed him, it was the only possible path for both of them. When the door finally closed behind her, Adam let out a long sigh, a mixture of relief and sadness. He knew this was just the first step in the long recovery process, but he was determined to move forward. Months had passed since Laura left the house where she and Adam had made so many memories. She tried to get back on her feet, but the emptiness was constant. A painful presence at every moment, her attempts to find her old life became a burden. She carried with the same sense of loss and regret that has accompanied her since the night Adam left. He gave her the ring in the restaurant. Every time she thought of him, she felt a sharp pain, the weight of the future she had thrown away for a fleeting moment of dissatisfaction. Laura struggled to maintain a minimum of stability, but without financial resources, and separated from her former friends, who now saw in her only the shadow of a person who had betrayed the man who loved her most. Every day seemed like a battle without victory. The financial situation became increasingly precarious. Without Adam's support, and with her reputation in tatters, she was forced to find temporary work to survive his paintings. Once his passion and escape were now a reflection of an unattainable past. The inspiration that once flowed was replaced by a sadness that stained her canvases, reflecting the loss she felt inside. Over time, the few people who still kept in touch with her moved away, unable to understand or accept the betrayal Laura had committed. Adam, for his part, remained determined to rebuild his life. The first months were difficult. The feeling of betrayal still nagged at him, but he channeled the pain into rediscovering himself. He became more involved in his work, made new contacts, and gradually rebuilt the routine free from the remnants of his past. With Laura, the house he had renovated to become their home, now a space for personal renewal. He removed every trace of Laura's presence, every photo, every memory, transforming the environment to reflect who he was. Now a man who, though wounded, was ready to move on. The emotional impact Laura had had on him was still profound, but Adam chose not to dwell on the bitterness. He took up new hobbies, formed sincere friendships, and slowly allowed himself to believe that it was possible to rebuild his life in a chance encounter. Adam met someone who sparked a new interest in him. The conversation, light and unpretentious, brought back a sense of normalcy he thought he had lost forever. Slowly and carefully, he began to explore this new possibility, aware that he was now stronger and less naive. One day at work, Adam received a letter from Laura. He read it with the serenity of someone who had already overcome pain. On paper, she apologized again, confessing how much her life had changed since the end of her marriage and the constant regret that consumed her. The letter was a desperate plea for forgiveness, but Adam read it without any desire to respond. He understood in that moment that his time with Laura, while meaningful, is part of a past from which he now felt free. With a calm gesture, he put the letter in a drawer and decided to move forward without looking back. Meanwhile, Laura was still in her lonely routine. She tried to find a way to live with the regret and guilt, but the loneliness was relentless. As she watched life unfold around her, she realized what she had lost. Not just a husband, but the possibility of a real and solid life, something that now seemed unattainable. The betrayal had cost her everything, and memories of the past haunted her, reminding her of a time when she was happy without knowing it. She who once longed for new experiences and adventures now wanted only one thing, the peace she never found since she destroyed what she had with Adam. In the end, everyone followed their own path, but in opposite ways. Adam found the strength to start over and rebuild his life on a new solid foundation. While Laura lived in the shadow of the past she had destroyed,